Hi everyone, and welcome to your weekly energy update, a general tarot guidance taking a look at how this week's energies are likely to influence our lives both individually and collectively. Now, before I begin the interpretation of the cards, I would just like to mention a couple of things about this week's astrology, because this is one of the weeks where apparently a lot of things are gonna start happening because we have a really active Mars in an erratic degree of Virgo, and ultimately Mars is the planet of action. Virgo can be seen as our routines, work, everything that has to do with our immediate material lives. So chances are all of us are going to take some action, maybe to, let's say, implement changes, fix things, resolve things, find solutions to problems, or we might be contacted by work, by other people who we have like material connections with. And this already might be telling us that we'll be pretty busy and solicited from a certain perspective, but at the same time, Mars in this energetic position holds a very strong and pretty negative square with a dwarf planet called Ixion. So, we must be careful not to take certain things very seriously, not to allow our duties, obligations, what other people ask of us, or what we ask of other people to really, really stress us out, because it can have a negative impact on our health. And at the same time, we have an opposition between the Sun and Neptune. And from a psychological perspective, this is, where things can seem so very melancholic, things can seem very uncertain, and not necessarily because in physical reality they're not certain. We might not really be able to embody the energy of hope this week. And that can also represent a certain kind of disappointment, a certain kind of emotional fatigue, if this makes sense. And also really powerful dreams, but where these dreams, even if they're symbolic, they're a little bit exaggerated, in the sense that maybe the symbolism of the dreams is way too extreme, as in, even if it has meaning, well, chances are it won't manifest in such an intense way as it did in the dreams, especially when there are also emotional states involved in that dream, whatever you lived, like fear or joy or whatever. So basically this is where we have to take everything with a pinch of salt, because the Sun in Virgo, a very rational sign, while it wants to analyze, it wants to interpret in a rather perfectionist way, it wants whatever is transmitted through our dreams to be understood consciously. But with the opposition of Neptune, this is where some things are just meant to be a mystery and not meant to be understood. So keep this in mind, that this is one of those weeks where nothing is as severe as it seems. And another thing I would like to say, this is also a week where we have a massive buildup of energy, so we might experience certain tension building up. And as I said, this doesn't have to be negative at all. This can be, for example, quite positive. Ambition, hope, motivation, etc. And it is going to be the week that follows, so next week, when that discharge is going to take place with the Pisces full moon. So what I'm saying is that next week is going to be much more relevant, regarding events. So now let's begin the interpretation. First of all, I'm going to speak about what these cards represent collectively, and then I'll get to the personal interpretation. Now, first of all, we have the Knight of Coins, clarified by the Four of Wands and the Justice. From a collective perspective, this is pretty straightforward. The Knight of Coins represents effort, work from a very down-to-earth perspective, where that effort and work is regarding more than one issue. It can mean the financial situation, where financial stability is definitely not present in the world. even if we look at it from a very collective perspective, as in humanity in general, of course there are some countries where it's much more chaotic and unstable, and I'm so sorry to say this, there are some places where it is heading very fast towards a true crisis and poverty. But even if there are places, countries where it's not that bad, well, there is still a lot of fluctuations, uncertainty, and this Knight of Coins represents the effort individually and also collectively of the authorities, banking, everything that has to do with financial situation, to fix it, to offer some kind of progress, to gallop out of the crisis, to try our very best to prevent it. But the Knight of Coins is the slowest knight in the tarot, so this will definitely not happen overnight. But what the Four of Wands represents is that certain category of people, especially those who are truly disadvantaged and in big risk, may seem a certain kind of promise, improvement, or even some kind of grants offered to them, which can help in the short term. So you see, the Justice can represent a legal promise, and the Four of Wands, that promise actually helping. And especially, with businesses where the rent or the place, real estate might be a danger, a problem. It can also represent really important and strong effort, even from a legal perspective, to fight against discrimination and the legal uncertainty. For example, who is eligible for help, who is eligible for some kind of benefit. But there is another side of this, because as I said, the Knight of Coins is very slow. So this might also represent that there is legal help, there is financial help, everything. But in those places in the world where there are still restrictions, as in you're not allowed to do what you wish, as in to go where you want, you have to stay in the house, etc. Well, that means that the restrictions, chances are not gonna be lifted yet, so it's really dual. Maybe the financial help and the security in this sense won't really satisfy people, because the law will still require, passivity, as in to stay in the house, to live a normality which is basically forced upon you. Now next we have the Two of Cups reversed, clarified by the Knight of Wands and the Ace of Wands. Well, this is not a very good energy, because the Two of Cups, it can mean so very many things. On the world stage, it definitely speaks about alliance. And this is where former allies might have a conflictual relationship with each other. The Knight of Wands is, fire and it's quick action. The Ace of Wands, well, that can represent an act of aggression. That can represent fighting in any way, shape or form, not necessarily physical. But chances are it can also be physical, because these Wands energies can represent explosion, bombs, very extreme gestures. And that is exactly why I mentioned the astrology when I began this reading, because Ixion, an energetic degree of Sagittarius, is the prime example of religious fanaticism. And Mars in energetic Virgo, well, religion should be like a philosophy, it should be something internal, right? That is where Mars will act upon it, and never ever something good is born out of such things. But of course, it can also represent a kind of conflict within countries, so not necessarily international, but it might mean that the same conflict takes place in more countries at the same time. And naturally, the Two of Cups. People, cups, the emotional connection between people and their representatives. This is where it can represent like a divorce, where people will demand politicians to step down, the governments to step down, and there are gonna be protests and everything that has to do with people fighting for what they desire, the Two of Cups. And because this Two of Cups is reversed, well, it can mean that in some places in the world, there might be a chance where the government actually steps down, maybe the president steps down, or the people will triumph in this sense. But remember what I said at the beginning, nothing is as it seems. Maybe whoever replaces them is pretty much the same, so let's not live in illusion. Then we have the Six of Swords reversed, clarified by the Ace of Cups and the Temperance reversed. Now this isn't a good news as well, because the Six of Swords represents, from a collective perspective, ultimately science, scientific progress, also official communication, and in reverse position, well, it is blocked, and it also is very dual and conflictual in nature. What is true, what is not true, and this isn't where it's like conspiracy and stuff like that. This doesn't necessarily represent that people will battle each other on Facebook and social media, where that is also part of the picture. But this even says that within scientific organizations, there is going to be a battle. So this is the battle of the scientists themselves. And if scientists cannot reach an agreement, well, you can imagine that no one will actually know what's true and what's not true. No one will know what to believe. Also, this Ace of Cups with the Temperance reversed. The Temperance is healing after all. And this might suggest that certain restrictions and lockdowns and, a return, the Six of Swords reversed, as in all the progress that we have done until this present moment is going backwards. So that means a lot of places in the world where restrictions are not in place yet are gonna be discussed. As in, this doesn't mean that they will implement it yet, but it will represent that they will talk about it and plan doing it. So you can imagine that on one hand, it will really incite people. And on the other hand, Temperance reversed, there might actually be a risk of sickness, the cases soaring, and any other kind of medical problems. May it be due to the virus itself or the vaccine or, a decline of healthcare. Maybe this represents that the biggest problem is not the COVID and vaccines, but other illnesses, let's say, which were ignored, like cancer patients, Ace of Cups dialysis patients, etc. This might spark a lot of conflict. But chances are this plan to reinstall the restrictions and the medical crisis is not going to be executed yet. It is just going to be put in discussion or put out there. Last we have the Magician reverse, clarified by the Strength card and the Nine of Cups. Now this is a very interesting symbol because the Magician reversed ultimately represents, from a global perspective, that things are not going to be under anyone's control. This is where it's a full-blown chaos, where even those people, organizations, governments, etc., who usually hold the power and who pull the strings and understand this as you like, everyone's gonna basically lose control. But maybe that moment of losing control is where another group, that which is in the shadow, where the Strength card represents freedom fighters, etc., are gonna seize this moment to gain a lot of strength and influence. So we can expect certain surprises out there, maybe surprises which we might not have even dreamed about. Because, the Nine of Cups is wish fulfillment of those who oppose the norm. But, those who oppose the norm can be split into many different groups with different, sometimes even contradicting interests. So this just adds to the chaos. And another way of seeing this is that the magician reversed, as in lost control, the chaos, all of that. Maybe from a collective perspective, it looks like, something almost close to anarchy. But from an individual perspective, this is where individuals, as in people, personally speaking, not groups, just people personally, are gonna rise to power. So maybe a lot of good, a lot of positive karmic fulfillment, for example, wish fulfillment is gonna take place in the lives of many people at the same time. And that changes the, how should I even say, the quantum picture of the collective. It's almost like living in two different dimensions, realities at the same time. It's a little bit like living in the Twilight Zone, yes, once again. And now, of course, let's take a look at what all of this can mean strictly from an individual perspective. Now, individually speaking, the Knight of Coins with the Four of Wands and the Justice is quite a good news. It can represent successful work, successful investment. Of course, this is just a knight, so it is the immediate future. It is not like super long term or not like hitting the jackpot. It basically just means being able to cope more than decently from every perspective, not just materially, but also psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. The Four of Wands can represent the support of your family. It can represent that you fix your living conditions. If you had problems with rent and anything which has to do with your stability, as in living wise, good news can reach you. The Justice card can represent favorable legal cases, the favorable evolution of legal cases, communication, documents, sorting all of that stuff out. It can also represent help from your partner, or sometimes you coping in every possible sense as a family. And this is especially true for those who are married, for those who have families, for those who live in any kind of partnerships. Even if it's not a romantic one, it can represent work, career, projects, finances. For some people, it can even represent where if they had a legal case, this is where the trier is ruled in a favorable sense for them, because the Four of Wands can also represent celebration of any kind. And for some very lucky individuals out there, this represents marriage proposals. So maybe if you have a partner but are not married yet, maybe they will come with an offer. Or it can also be an invitation to a wedding or invitation to some kind of celebration. For those who are looking for a job, this can represent a really favorable week when you might get a lot of good offers. For those who have some kind of project-based business, creative-based business, or investment-based, lucrative purposes, this can also be a really good week. And now moving on, we have the Two of Cups reversed with the Knight of Wands and the Ace of Wands. Now, this is very, very tricky individually, because it can represent for some people like good, very good. For other people, it can represent like problems, a lot of problems actually. And now let's start with the not so favorable expression first, to get it out of the way. Well, the Two of Cups reversed with these Wands energies, it can mean either infidelity in a relationship. It can represent the truth coming out that someone wasn't loyal to you. Sometimes it's not a romantic relationship. It can be like a very close friendship, or any kind of partnership where there isn't just like a legal connection, but also a lot of emotions attached. So even if it's work, it can definitely mean someone who you are very good friends with. It can also represent fights, arguments, diverging interests within a couple, a relationship. It can also represent like power games and one partner manipulating the other and vice versa. So this is where both partners are in total disharmony with each other. This is where both are aggressors at the same time. And it might even come to some very quick and hasty decisions like separation, maybe filing for divorce. But just know that we have an upcoming Mercury Retrograde season in the sign of Libra, marriage, partnerships, etc. So even if you feel this way right now, things might definitely change. So it's not really set in stone regardless of how bad the situation looks like. Now the favorable interpretation of these cards, the Two of Cups reversed, as in you might be single and maybe dreaming of having a partner or love or romance, but you might not really, especially from a rational perspective, believe that you have a lot of chances, especially right now, especially this week. And surprise, surprise, someone might show up. Because the Knight of Wands can represent passion, the Ace of Wands can represent a genuine interest and a lot of sexual energies. But this is where the Two of Cups is reversed, so there is genuine innocence there. Maybe both you and this person who might show up are not gonna, jump to action and do anything, but, take it very slowly and see if this is real, if this may actually make sense. So yes, there is an offer there is a genuine interest, and there is a lot of passion, a lot of fire energy, even sexual attraction in the background, but just in the background, which means that both you and this potential person might have been dreaming of this for a lot of time, years or even months. So it doesn't matter how you feel deep inside, you're not gonna take immediate action, you're gonna take it very, very slowly. Maybe there is a friendship which begins the whole thing, but at the same time for other people this can turn out the opposite way, where there is heated action, immediate action, so to speak, and both of you might expect this to be a one-night stand or to go as quickly as it comes, and you might be shocked and surprised that it left you with emotions, so it's not over. Maybe the action begins something more than both of you bargained for, so either way, this is where it's like a seed that can grow, so you might be a little bit shocked and surprised and not knowing what to do next, but that's not really a problem. This is where even if this is a confusing energy, it's actually positive. Now, moving on, we have this Six of Swords reversed with the Ace of Cups and the Temperance reversed. Now, this can either mean that maybe you had certain decisions or future plans, especially when you said, I'm moving away from this and that, regardless of what that means, emotionally, purely intellectually, contractually, wanting to change jobs, wanting to do something different, paperwork or plans, anything which might have to do with you making plans. This can even include like specific dates, times, I do this then. And this is where maybe 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago, you were at the drawing board and you created a certain kind of pattern that you would like to follow and understand this in any sense, but especially in a rather practical sense. And this is where something happens which makes you go back to the drawing board and correct those plans. And chances are it's not something bad, because it's the Ace of Cups. It will feel like maybe a blessing. Maybe the way you feel changes for the good. Maybe you have some kind of hopes, and whatever you decided back then to eliminate or to block out or to no longer invest energy into take into consideration because your feelings change. You go back to the drawing board and include those, or correct your plans to include them. And this is where the temperance reverse is not really a bad thing. It does send you in a kind of imbalance, but that imbalance just means that you have to correct your plans, as in come up with the new solutions. But for you guys, the same thing as I said earlier, Mercury Retrograde is coming, so, whatever this represents, this might just be the Mercury in shadow. It sets the theme for the Mercury Retrograde season, and maybe then is the time. So after September, when you actually come up with the right balance, the right plan, the right modus operandi, the right people, partners, with relations with authorities, anything which has to do with basically going back to the drawing board. But as I said, this is a blessing. So this going back and on your tracks or redoing your plans is actually fueled by something really positive, not negative. And even if there is negativity here, the temperance reverse, as I said, the sun opposes Neptune. Whatever might disappoint you, actually quickly, this isn't like months or years, leads you to something much better. So if you're disappointed by someone, something, or your own plans, your own ideals, that is where the disappointment also shows you something much better. As in, you planned like doing something, or someone promised you something and you believed it and you had hopes. But this is where the disillusion actually shows you what you truly desire and what truly resonates with you. So you will find it easy to get out of the disappointment, or perhaps that is going to be instant, like the lightning bolt moment. Or for other people, this might have a lot to do with that partnerships or unexpected romance. Maybe you plan for one person, for yourself, and this is where you have to redo it because all of a sudden there are two people in the picture, you and someone special. Now the Magician reverse with the Strength and Nine of Cups is also a really good energy, because the Magician reverse represents that nothing is going to go to plan. You won't have control over so very many situations in your life. But this is where it's definitely not going to be a bad thing, because it does represent that the loss of control is due to a wish fulfillment, something unexpected, or you gain a lot of strength somewhere in an area of life or in a situation where you had no hopes, zero hopes for this. So this actually suggests that something uplifting, something positive, or even, as I said, a wish fulfillment coming out of nowhere is gonna change your plans. Now, last but not least, we also have divine guidance, and this is the Two of Earth and the Nine of Earth. Now, what the Two of Earth tells us is very, very simple. This is where you have to manage, especially, Earth, your material situation, your time, or your health, or simply your well-being, including the material one. And you must do this by knowing, nothing that you do or nothing that you take action with can please everyone. So basically, take each day, take each moment, take each action, each decision as it is, as in sometimes you have to please yourself most of all, other times you have to please another person or a situation. So basically do what feels right, especially out of your instincts, each day and each moment as it comes. And also what this means is, don't be perfectionist. Trying your best is more than enough. And at the same time, if someone else helps you too, Two of Earth, and they do their best to help you, that has to be enough. Don't hair split, don't criticize. Being able to be just okay, stable, managing in the now is enough. So basically, as long as you're okay in the present moment, and you know that you're gonna be okay for the very short-term future, that has to be enough. That is security enough for you to basically live life and not worry excessively about tomorrow in the longer term. And we have the Nine of Earth, and this delivers a very special message. Well, ultimately, Nine of Earth represents one's connection with Mother Nature. So this is like a divine guidance to use your free time to go out in nature, to connect with nature, to spend time with nature as much as you can in the now, in the present. Because maybe in the future we won't have as many opportunities as we have right now. So this might also be a little bit of a hint that maybe new restrictions are coming. But at the same time, from a purely spiritual perspective, these are the last days, the last moments of Virgo season, when, astrologically speaking, everything favors connection with nature and the earth and the harvest and all of that. So the energies of Mother Nature are the most nourishing, replenishing, rejuvenating in the now. And this to be understood both physically, as in consuming fruits of the harvest, well, vitamins, minerals, and any sugars, any kind of nourishment that prepares you for the winter season, even physically. And spiritually speaking, this is when the soul connection between us and nature is as solid as an umbilical cord, where we can draw upon the nourishing powers of nature, feeding our souls with inspiration, feeding our souls with natural energy, so to speak. And of course, I know that in some parts of the world, this is where autumn is coming, so Mother Nature preparing herself for the winter, while in other parts of the world spring is coming. Mother Nature preparing herself to awaken. But both of these seasons have a lot to do with nourishment, both physically and spiritually. So embrace this and basically allow your soul to draw in all the nourishment, all the sunlight, all the fragrances, and the physical beauty of nature, regardless if it's autumn or spring, the leaves and, the forest changing color, etc., etc. Because this will turn into a major blessing in the months to come. So this concludes your reading. I do hope that you enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you'd like to support my work, you can donate on the PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, I wish everyone a magical and wonderful week. Until next time, bye for now.